I remember sitting right here, actually it was right here, at the very last day of session in 1997. That was the year that Senator Bruno, the leader in the Senate, announced that all the rent protection laws were going to go away. And of course, he could have made that happen because the tenant protection laws had a sunset clause. And we had to spend the next several months negotiating to try to make sure the laws were renewed, and the Emergency Tenant Protection Act was renewed, and so on. But starting that year, and actually even before, every single time there were successful efforts made to weaken the protections that tenants had. And that year was particularly bad because although we were successful in getting the law renewed, several provisions were put into the law that really were anti-tenant. And I think those who supported that understood that it would take a number of years for it to really achieve its full effect. So this is what the effect has been of the weakening of tenant protections, which started 20 and 25 years ago. Homelessness in New York City went up significantly. And there's no coincidence that the homelessness went up the same time rents skyrocketed. If you look at the statistics on homelessness and the statistics on rent, if you put it in a chart, in a graph, you wouldn't be able to tell the two apart. Most people who are homeless in New York are homeless, their families, because they can't afford to stay in their apartments. And it's gotten worse and worse over the years. And every gimmick in the book was used to raise those rents. It wasn't only the Rent Guidelines Board increases, which in some years were actually very high, even if not so in the past few years, but it was the 20% vacancy bonus, and it was the MCIs, it was the IAIs, the list went on, and in a year's time, in some apartments, rents could be doubled, not to mention all the apartments over time that were being forced out of rent stabilization because they exceeded the threshold. So what's being done here today is going to help reverse that trend. Now, I know it was mentioned earlier that the pendulum is going too far. The way I see it, the pendulum went too far in the wrong way many years ago, and all that we're doing here today is to try to put the pendulum back in the middle, to try to correct some of the past mistakes that were made, and to try to put tenants on a level playing field. The 20% vacancy bonus, can you imagine why should somebody get a 20% increase for basically sitting on their chairs and doing nothing? Why should they get that? And as far as, and I know some of this I'm sure was said already, but the MCIs and the IAIs were so subject to abuses. And I know this firsthand because we have a lot of people who come to our office dealing with these problems. And there is no question in my mind that while some landlords may actually turn in honest bills on the IAIs and MCIs, there are others who don't. And some of the individual apartment improvements are made not to improve the apartments as such, but simply to raise the rent. And so they will tear out a kitchen which didn't need to be torn apart, tear out the fixtures in the bathroom, and so on, spend X number of dollars, and maybe submit a bill for 5X number of dollars. And the formula is such that they get these enormous increases, and they never go away, and every future increase is compounded on that. Well, that's not going to happen anymore. But landlords are still going to get some money off MCIs and IAIs. It's just not going to be what they're used to. And one of the biggest problems we've had in our district, and I assume throughout the city in recent years, is the problems caused by preferential rents. And the preferential rents are such that tenants are maybe paying less than what the landlords are allowed to charge and what the maximum legal rent is, but it's not less than what the market will bear. But the problem is that the landlords have a right today to go back to the legal rent at the next lease. And that means that no tenant is going to want to ever make any demands of the landlord, even though those demands are well-deserved, like, fix something, because they're afraid that the landlord will simply jack up the rent from the preferential rent number to a very high number. We're changing that here today. And one of the other things we're doing, it's actually one of the bills in this package that I had originally, which is to deal with the rent overcharge look back. Right now, if a landlord overcharges and you move into an apartment some years later, and I'm not saying the landlord was committing fraud, although that could have been the case, but simply a mistake, and it happened 4.5 years ago, you can't do anything about it. You can't get that mistake corrected. We changed that. We make the look-back period a 6-year statute of limitations, and there's even a further look-back under certain circumstances. So when you take these issues together, what it means is that these enormous rent increases, which is the single biggest cause of homelessness in New York, won't be happening to the degree that they have been happening for the past 20 or 25 years. This is going to protect people that we represent, and I can tell you that representing my district, the 4 districts in the West Bronx, mine, Assemblyman Rivera's, Joyner's, and Pichardo's, we have perhaps the highest or one of the highest concentration of rent-regulated apartments anywhere in the city. And so we have a huge number of people who are going to benefit from us simply leveling the playing field and having that pendulum swing back to the middle where it should be. So landlords, yes, they'll still be able to make a profit. I mean, when I hear people whining and complaining, no, they're going to make lots of money. They just may not make quite as much money, and that's money that's going to be in the pockets of average New Yorkers who are trying to live and stay in the city and be able to afford to have their own apartment. So I'm very, after all these years, I am so ecstatic that we are finally doing this. I'm thankful to our chair, to our speaker, and everybody, because I know this is a package that a lot of people participated in. This is going to make life better for people in our districts and people in the state. So I would strongly urge a yes vote.